Hey everybody, and welcome to Monday Night Book Study with Northeast Christian Apologetics. My name is Simon Williams, and I hope everyone's having a great night tonight. Hope everyone's having a great week. Tonight we're going to be studying tactics, as we have been for a while. My week has been good. I have started up apologetics classes at both the church and Castle Church in Norwich, and they seem to be going well. People are saying that they're blessed by it, so that's encouraging. Hoping to do more churches in the local area. Also taught at Merciful Redemption Church on this last Saturday, talking about the resurrection of Jesus and alternative hypotheses for the early rise of Christianity and why they are not to be preferred over the classical Christian hypothesis. God raised Jesus from the dead. Jesus genuinely rose from the dead, bodily, that kind of stuff. So, been very happy about being able to do that and provide that for my fellow Christians. So tonight we're going to be continuing in Chapter 10 of Tactics, and last week we finished up Part 1 of our book, which was introducing us to the Columbo tactic, and we finished Chapter 9, which was the turnabout, which was defending against the Columbo. And when people start asking you questions, how you can respond to those kinds of things. And we have to understand as well that we're talking about they're using Columbo in a different way than what we're trying to use Columbo. When we use the Columbo tactic, we're trying to understand a view better, and we're trying to understand why they came to have that view better, and also we're trying to get them to see problems that we detect in their worldview, or get them to better understand a certain aspect of a worldview or things like that. We are asking questions to gain clarity. We're always trying to gain clarity and seek truth. But a lot of people can use the Columbo tactic in order to confuse. They can use the Columbo tactic to cause chaos or just disrupt their thinking and instill doubts. And they're doing it just for the sake of doubts. They're not trying to provide us with what they believe to be an alternative and better worldview. They're just doing it to destroy your worldview, and that's not good. Sasha says hello. Hello, Sasha. I appreciate when you guys leave a comment and say hi and stuff and ask questions and things of that nature. So I appreciate that. Just a reminder, Tactics is a book written by Greg Koukl. Here he is right here. And he runs a ministry called Stand to Reason. Definitely check that out. Really important. And and as always, I recommend you get the book yourself, and you can get it at Amazon or christianbooks.com. It's really good to have this book in your library, and I encourage you guys to get it so that you can read along with me and make reference of it when you are just studying in your own time, that kind of stuff. These books are designed to help. And if you're not already, please consider subscribing. I am trying to get part of this ministry is the focus of Northeast Christian Apologetics is to provide to make apologetics resources convenient in the Northeast area, especially where I am, so I can go to churches and teach apologetics and be a one-on-one kind of guy where they have something, a face that they can actually talk to. But I've noticed that some people have whenever I teach apologetics, and also sometimes when I preach or I'm asked to preach, people will come up to me and ask if I have some online content because they're not always able to come out to classes. So that's what this is intended to do a online book study where people who would want to come to the classes but can't can still interact with the ministry. Mighty Venus says hi. Hey, how's it going, man? Appreciate you coming out. Appreciate everyone who comes out and leaves nice comments for me. I certainly don't always get nice comments, that's for sure. But you know, that's the nature of it when you put yourself out there, and you are, you know, trying to expand God's kingdom. There's going to be people who don't like that, and other things as well. But yeah. So I hope that you guys are ready for Chapter 10 tonight. Chapter 10 is Suicide, Views that Self-Destruct. So we're going to be diving into worldviews that contradict themselves or just don't work in and of themselves. And we're only going to be touching the surface of this. Another really good book that we might read in the future is True for You But Not for Me by Paul Koukl. That's also a really that's an apologetics kind of staple kind of book that I've been kind of going through these books. They're like apologetics, Christian apologetics staples, On Guard, Tactics. We're going to be reading some more books kind of like that where they're well known in the Christian apologetics scene. But we are also going to be diving into books and things written by non-Christians, books written by like Bart Ehrman or other atheists, J.L. Schellenberg and Graham Oppie and Patrick Grimm, things of that nature. But yeah, until then, we're going to stick with this. We want to make sure we are doing a good, solid foundation before we jump into anything that is meant to tear down. Like the thing about Christian apologetics is that it's kind of like exercise, where you're often studying things that are meant to challenge your faith, but it's from the position of it's presented by people who want you to ultimately be strengthened in your faith. So it's a good kind of tearing down of the faith so you can build back stronger. But a lot of non-Christians try to tear down your faith in a way that's meant to destroy it. And that's not what we want. That is not what we want. All right, so Chapter 10, Suicide Views. And also as a reminder, there's a delay. So if you guys have any questions, or for me in particular, don't hesitate to leave a comment, and I'll get to it as soon as I can and as soon as I see it. Don't be discouraged if I don't get to it right away. And I always say this in every video, but this is more like a react channel, kind of, where we, instead of reacting to movies and videos, we react to books. We read books, we talk about them, I offer my insights and elaborate on certain points. And that's also a benefit of actually purchasing the book yourself or getting an Audible. That way you can read it yourself without getting, prevented from reading it faster and things like that. And you can hear it without me stumbling over the words. But yeah, so this is live. Anyway, all right, so Koukl. Someone once said that if you give a man enough rope, he'll hang himself. Our next tactic is based on the tendency of many erroneous views to self-destruct. Such ideas get caught in their own noose and quickly expire. Commonly known as self-refuting views, these ideas defeat themselves, like the sign in the restaurant saying authentic Italian food served the traditional Chinese way, or the tabloid headline that reads, "Woman gives birth to her own father." Views that commit suicide are often obvious. Here is another example from a philosophy student's T-shirt. The front sported the caption, "The statement on the back of this shirt is false." The back of the shirt read, "The statement on the front of this shirt is true." There is no need to expend energy addressing views that are bent on destroying themselves. They die by their own hand, saving you the trouble. If an atheist tells you he knows God doesn't exist because God told him so in a vision, your work is already done. All you need to do is point out the problem and quietly watch the view commit harikari. All right, I got it. Click on this. So, if it's true, it's false. Here's how self-refutation works. Every statement is about something. The sentence, cats chase rats, is about cats. Sometimes statements include themselves in what they refer to. The statement, all English sentences are false, is about all English sentences, including itself. In this last case, you can immediately see a problem. The statement has within it the seeds of its own destruction. If all English sentences are false, then the English sentence declaring it so must also be false. And if false, then it is easily and appropriately dismissed. Because it cannot satisfy its own standard, it falls on its own sword. When statements fail to meet their own criteria of validity, they are self-refuting. Even when they seem true at first glance, and many do, they still prove themselves false. The minute the words are uttered, the claim fails. Here are some conspicuous examples I have encountered over the years. There are no absolutes. Is that an absolute? No one can know any truth about religion. And how do you come to know that truth about religion? That first one, there are no absolutes, is a big topic of is a focus item on True for You But Not for Me by Paul Copeland, like I mentioned earlier. The book I mentioned earlier. You can't know anything for sure. Are you sure about that? Talking about God is meaningless. What does this statement about God mean? You can know truth only through experience. What experience taught you that rational truth about knowledge? All right, so a lot of these, when you read them, you got to pay close attention to the words that are being used. Like this, you can know truth only through experience. Now, you can reject that statement and still obviously believe that you can discover truth through experience, because that is a major way that we discover truth, especially since we're living in a physical universe, interacting with objects and things of that nature. We're constantly experiencing things. But you can also know things through rational reflection, and you can also come to know things that your direct experience merely infers or implies, like historical truths. You don't experience history, when it actually happens. You experience the documents claiming to be witnesses of it, or claiming or describing the event, or archaeology that lend credibility to certain claims or certain hypotheses, that kind of stuff. So keep that in mind. All right, so never take anyone's advice on that issue. Should I take your advice on that? I am the only one here who is not unique. Think about it. All right, so the suicide tactic works because of a rule of logic you are already familiar with, even if you're not familiar with its name. It's called the law of non-contradiction. This law reflects the common sense notion that contradictory statements cannot both be true at the same time. And this is something that I kind of want to emphasize right now, is that a lot of philosophy is reflecting on and coming to realize like common sense aspects that we just do naturally. Philosophy has a way of complicating things that are really simple, and this is one of those cases where philosophy can often seem overwhelming at first, but when you slow down and think about it, and then it's like, oh, I just do this naturally. Like argumentation and induction and this kind of stuff, like I do it naturally. So don't get overwhelmed by this stuff. All suicidal views either express or entail contradictions. They make two different claims that are at odds with each other. A is the case and A is not the case. Obvious contradictions are often funny because we readily see the absurdity built into them. I used to believe in reincarnation, but that was in a former life, which is to say I don't believe in reincarnation. I do believe in reincarnation. Or nobody goes there anymore. It's too crowded. It's not crowded. It is crowded. Or I wish I had an answer to that because I'm tired of answering that question. I don't know the answer to that question. I do know the answer to that question. I really didn't say everything I said. I did not say it. I did say it. This page is intentionally left blank. This page is blank. This page is not blank. And this one's kind of funny for me personally because I used to write procedures at Millstone, and I would put that on the page, and I would think of this. every time I put it on the page, but it does serve a purpose, and and one thing I'm going to note is that these examples that Koukl is providing us with are meant to be kind of funny, and they're also things that people say not intending to be precise. And when you're engaging with somebody on topics relating to God and the existence of God and philosophical notions of like analyzing worldviews and things of that nature, you should not be using language in a flippant, kind of imprecise way. You need to practice using precise terminology, and that way you don't get this kind of confusion where people are saying things imprecisely and end up saying things that could be interpreted in a contradictory way. Like, for example, when he says that nobody goes there anymore, it's too crowded. This could be referring to like the local people don't go there anymore because there's too many tourists. That kind of stuff. Or I wish I had an answer to that because I'm tired of answering the question. It's probably better to be stated like I'm tired of being asked that because I don't have a answer for it. Like like whenever they get asked about it, they stumble over an answer and they're not satisfied with their own answer, and they realize that they don't have a satisfactory answer. So keep that in mind. It's important to be precise. But continuing with Koukl's examples, you are in rare form as usual. Your performance is rare. Your performance is not rare. These terrorists have technology we don't even know about. We know about things we don't know about. When an idea or objection violates the law of non-contradiction in a straightforward fashion, I call it formal suicide. To determine whether a view has suicidal tendencies, first pay attention to the basic idea, premise, conviction, or claim. Try to identify it. Next, ask if the claim applies to itself. If so, is there a conflict? Does that statement fail to live up to its own standards? Can it be stated in a form A? Can it be stated in the form A is the case and A is not the case? If so, it commits suicide. This procedure may sound a bit cumbersome at first, but in practice it's an almost instantaneous process if you're paying attention and know what to watch for. Here's another way of looking at it. If exactly the same reason in favor of another's view or against your own defeat the reasons themselves, then the view is self-defeating. The final step is easy. Simply point out the contradiction using a question when possible. When someone says there is no truth, ask, is that statement true? And I've actually done this in Bible studies, and you'll be surprised at the effect. It might have occurred to you that Columbo and suicide work well together. If you notice that a person's viewpoint self-destructs pointed out with a question rather than a statement. Challenges designed to show that a view is contradictory are always lethal if they can be sustained. The argument against God based on the existence of evil is popular because it trades on a presumed contradiction. This gives it unstoppable force if it succeeds. When a view commits suicide, it cannot be revived because there is no way to repair it. Even God can't give life to a contradictory notion. Philosophers say that such views are necessarily false. They cannot be true in any possible way because they are dead on arrival. Defending them is a lost cause. You might wonder why anyone would believe self-refuting ideas. Very few people knowingly affirm contradictions, though some are so evident you wonder how they could be missed. When contradictions are implicit, though, embedded in a larger idea, they are harder to see. This is the reason why people are taken in by them. We know that the claim, my brother is an only child, is false because the concept of brother entails having a sibling. When Yogi Berra counsels, always go to other people's funerals, otherwise they won't go to yours, we chuckle. A person cannot pay his last respects at your funeral if he's dead. Though these two contradictions are easy to spot, they are different from the explicit examples I've given. Here, the contradictions are under the surface. Implicit contradictions are sometimes difficult to identify because they are hidden. For the remainder of this chapter, I want to walk you through popular notions that are implicitly self-refuting. So you can see how the suicide tactic works. In each case, the problem is not immediately obvious. Every one of these fails, though, through contradiction. They are sunk before they ever set sail. So is truth true? I have already pointed out that the postmodern claim there is no truth invites an obvious question. Is that claim that there is no truth itself a true statement, or is it false? If false, then false. If alleged true, then false again. This fact became painfully obvious in my debate with noted academic Marvin Meyer. I defended the resolve objective truth exists and can be known, while Dr. Meyer took the opposite side. I want you to notice something about formal disputes like these. To debate, Dr. Meyer must argue against one view in favor of another. The argument takes a very particular form. The view he opposes, mine, is false, and the view he promotes, his, is true. This is what took place during our debate. With grace and considerable skill, the professor pointed out the failings of my perspective. Aristotle, it turns out, was wrong. Derrida was right. Mr. Koukl is mistaken. Professor Meyer is correct. Do you see the problem here? Dr. Meyer marshaled an array of facts, truth, and knowledge for the purpose of persuading his audience that facts, truth, and knowledge are all sophisticated fictions. In the course of the debate, I pointed out this liability to the audience. I mentioned that Dr. Meyer was forced by the nature of debate itself to make use of the very thing he was denying in the debate, dooming his effort to failure. Merely by showing up, Dr. Meyer had implicitly affirmed the resolve I was defending, effectively conceding the debate to me before it even began. I further pointed out to the audience that every vote cast for Dr. Meyer as the winner of the debate meant the voter had been persuaded that Dr. Meyer's view was objectively true and mine was objectively false. Therefore, every vote for my opponent was really a vote for me. The audience laughed, but the point wasn't lost on them. This wasn't because I was clever. It was because the view Dr. Meyer was defending was obviously false, a fact that couldn't be missed once the problem was carefully clarified. The Christian version of postmodernism fares no better, even though baptized with religious language. The following example from Christian college professor was related to me by a student from her class. Now, I feel like I need to mention this, is that many of the people that I have spoken to that think that truth is merely relative or that there is no objectivity, period, kind of stop thinking that way as soon as I ask that kind of question. You know, normally they're like, okay, yeah, I guess there is there is truth, you know. So, like, what would be the point of even debating about it if you really thought that objective truth didn't exist? You know, is it objectively true that objective truth doesn't exist? You know, it's obviously self-refuting. But anyway, are any of you in this room God? The professor scanned the audience slowly, looking for takers. No hands went up. God knows truth, she continued, writing the word in all capital letters on the board. All truth is God's truth. God is truth, but you are not God. Therefore, you only know truth. She then scrawled in a lowercase this secondary and substandard take on reality next to the superior version that is forever out of reach of mere humans. She paused for a moment, letting her point sink in, then closed. Have a nice day, she said, and dismissed the class. It was a brilliant piece of rhetorical wizardry. Students were too busy taking notes and worrying whether this would be on the test to think carefully about what had been stolen from them or the ruins this foreshadowed for their faith. The professor's assertions teemed with confusion. What does truth, all caps, mean? Omniscience? That couldn't be her meaning. That God knows everything and we do not is a trivial observation, hardly a revelation, even for a college freshman. Does she mean we can't know things in the way that God knows them, and that we don't see the world that the way he does? Again, not particularly profound. No, the professor was seeking to undermine the conviction that human beings can know something with absolute truth, knowledge they can count on. She was saying that instead we mortals inhabit a kind of knowledge twilight, where the outlines of reality are vague and indistinct, robbing us of all confidence that anything we think we know is actually so. The professor seemed blind to her point's suicidal tendencies. The following response makes this failure obvious. Note the questions. Professor, I'm confused about your comments. Is this insight you've offered true or false? I don't think you'd knowingly teach us something false, and so you must think it's true. And that's what confuses me. What kind of truth would that be? It couldn't be truth because you are not God, so it must be truth. But if this is just your personal perception of reality, why should any of us take you seriously? We have our own perceptions. Since, according to you, none of us has truth, who's to say who is right and who is wrong when it comes to the nature of truth itself? Can you clear this up for me? Paul warned us not to be taken captive through philosophy and empty deception according to the tradition of men, according to the elementary principle of the world, rather than according to Christ. Yet captivity abounds, even in places God intended to be a refuge from such error. Now, we do need to be careful about these kinds of things where we're talking about like perfect knowledge of the truth versus a belief that we can never know any truth. You need to have a rational middle ground where you recognize that perfect knowledge of the truth of a particular truth, it may be out of your reach, but you can still be reasonably confident that you know that you can formulate a model or a proposition or a statement that is accurate enough to be trusted. This last week we talked about street epistemologists, and they will. A lot of people have way too much confidence in their ability to determine the truth, and the point of street epistemology is to undermine that confidence, and they do it really good. But what you need to do is humble yourself and become more modest in your own ability to understand the truth. So do not be overly confident. Be humble about your ability to ascertain the truth, and know that you can trust your investigations and your reasoning ability sufficiently to say that you have the truth. You can believe something and say that this corresponds to truth, that how reality is actually constituted. So Koukl continues, can God make a rock so big he can't lift it? Okay, classic. This kind of challenge is called a pseudo question. It's like asking, can God win an arm wrestling match against himself? Or if God got in a fight with himself, who would win? Or can God's power defeat his own power? The question is nonsense because it treats God as if he were two instead of one. The comparative phrase stronger than can be used only when two subjects are in view. Like when we say Bill is stronger than Bob, or my left arm is stronger than my right arm. Since God is only one, it makes no sense to ask if he's stronger than himself. The question proves nothing about any deficiency in God, because the question itself, can God's omnipotence defeat his omnipotence, is incoherent. All right, so pay close attention to that. That was an important way to address this question. The question itself is incoherent. Can God make a rock so big he can't lift it? Can be more accurately be asked, is God's omnipotence stronger than his omnipotence? So, and that's what he says here. Can God's omnipotence defeat his omnipotence? It just is his omnipotence. It's not something, there is no stronger than, You also have to understand how God relates to reality. Like God relates to the physical world that we inhabit is a manifestation of God's intellect, at least on the model that I find most plausible. And you can do this yourself as well. You can do this exercise yourself. Can you imagine, when you imagine things, you imagine a small world, and this is kind of an analogy. We're made in God's image, and we have an intellect that's able to manifest things. And when you imagine a rock, can you imagine a rock that is too heavy for you to move, change from location to location? Me personally, I could make a rock as big as Jupiter and hurl that rock into the sun, in my world that I'm manifesting in my intellect. This is the kind of way that God relates to the physical world. It doesn't make any. The question itself doesn't make any sense. All right, so God doesn't take sides. This reprimand comes up every election cycle. I once saw a full-page ad in the Los Angeles Times lecturing one side of the political spectrum on this very point. The assertion is self-defeating, though, as illustrated in the following conversation. You think God is on your side, but you're wrong. God doesn't take sides. Let me ask you a question. In this disagreement we're having on whether God takes sides, so what do you think God's opinion is? I just told you God is against taking sides. Right. And so in our dispute, God would agree with you, not me. Just a second. That's right. He would side with you. So he would side with you in this issue then. I guess God does take sides after all. Note the contradiction. God doesn't take sides. God does take sides. The assertion is self-defeating. Not surprisingly, the ad went on to campaign for its political view as the moral high ground, compounding the error. To err is human. A common attack on the Bible goes like this. Men wrote the Bible. Men are imperfect, therefore the Bible is flawed and not inspired by God. Remember our rule for discovering suicidal statements. If exactly the same reasons in favor of another's view or against your own defeat the reasons themselves, then the view is defeating. The presumption that if man is capable of error, he will err applies also to this very argument against inspiration. Consider this exchange. You think the Bible must be flawed, because people make mistakes. Yes, that's the way it seems to me. I'm curious, why do you think you are an exception to that rule? What do you mean? Well, you don't seem to think you've made a mistake in your judgment of the Bible, but you're a flawed human being too. Of course I am, but I didn't mean that people always make mistakes. If people don't always make mistakes, though, you can't rule out the Bible just because people wrote it, can you? It's not enough to dismiss the Bible simply by noting that men wrote it. This in itself proves nothing. It doesn't follow that if people are capable of error, they always will err. Taken at face value, this objection is self-refuting. C.S. Lewis cites a related example. In response to the Freudian and Marxist claim that all thoughts are tainted, either psychologically or ideologically, at their source, he writes, if they say that all thoughts are thus tainted, then, of course, we must remind them that Freudian and Marxism are as much systems of thought as Christian theology. The Freudian and Marxian are in the same boat with all the rest of us and cannot criticize us from the outside. They have sawn off the branch they are sitting on. If, on the other hand, they say that the taint need not invalidate their thinking, they neither need it to invalidate ours. Then neither need it invalidate ours, in which case they have saved their own branch, but have also saved ours along with it. Statements like everyone's view is a product of his own prejudices, or all your so-called facts are only beliefs dictated by your cultural biases, falter for the same reason. Are these views themselves merely a product of prejudice or cultural bias? If so, why take them seriously? Going back to this God doesn't take sides thing, I want to make this note. When we're analyzing which side God is on, it's not really God being on our side as much as we're on God's side. So God is always on his team. And God sides, it appears that God sides with us insofar as our views align with God's. Okay, so keep that in mind. So you are on God's side, okay, if you are in alignment with God. Another thing about this to err as human aspect, a common analogy used to say that religion is kind of like dumb is to say that a lot of people compare it to like a bunch of blind religious leaders and religious founders and theologians are like blind men who are touching an elephant. And one man feels the elephant's leg and says, I'm touching a tree. And one man feels the elephant's trunk and says, I'm touching a snake. And the one man feels the elephant's tail and he's like, I'm touching a giant brush. And and they're all getting it wrong. But the thing about the analogy is that it's absurd because the person making the analogy says that he has the knowledge. Just like this, how does he know that it's an elephant? And another thing about the way that the analogy breaks down as well is whether or not the elephant is able to tell the blind men that he's an elephant. So on the Christian perspective, the reason why Christians believe the way they do about God, like the Trinity, the Incarnation, and things very technically advanced and extremely nuanced positions is because we believe that reality has told us about himself. Okay? So the blind men analogy break down for two reasons. The one making the analogy thinks he has knowledge that he couldn't possibly have. He's not more privileged in knowledge than the blind men who are touching the elephant. Two, the elephant is able to witness for himself. Like, hey, I'm an elephant. All right, so Atman is Brahman and Brahman is Atman. Hinduism as a religious view also seems compromised by contradictory notions. The pantheistic monism at the heart of some versions of this Eastern religion teaches that reality as we know it is an illusion, Maya, of which each of us is part. This Hindu concept that the world is an illusion contradicts the idea that I can know that I am a player in the illusion. Implicitly, it claims that I am not a real self and that I am a real self at the same time. Thus, the central doctrine of Hinduism self-destructs. If I am an illusion, how could I know it? How could I possess true knowledge that I do not exist? I think, therefore, I ain't. Do people in a dream know they are imaginary? Does Charlie Brown know he is a cartoon character? One escape route people have tried in order to avoid this problem is to claim that the law of contradiction is a Western notion that doesn't apply to Eastern thought like Hinduism. Eastern thinkers are comfortable with contradictions, so they say. This problem, though, has nothing to do with what people are comfortable with. It has to do with how reality is structured. People may be comfortable with all sorts of unusual things. This may tell you something about psychology, but not about reality. Computers work on a binary system of ones and zeros, or of zeros and ones. Because of the law of non-contradiction, we're able to keep these two distinct. It doesn't matter whether the computer is in the Eastern Hemisphere or the Western Hemisphere, or whether the person at the keyboard is Christian, Hindu, Taoist, animist, or atheist. The computer works regardless because reality is still structured according to the law of non-contradiction, even if people from other cultures are psychologically confused on this point. So, theistic evolution designed by chance? Some people suggest that God used evolution to design the world. They are motivated, I think, by two impulses. The first is a desire to affirm the Bible. The second is a conviction that the standard Darwinian model has merit. Thus, they declare both true. These two notions, however, seem incompatible to me. It may sound reasonable for God to use evolution, but if you look closer, I think you will see the problem. Suppose I wanted a straight flush for a hand of poker. Either I could pull the cards out of the deck individually and design the hand, or I could shuffle the cards randomly and see if the flush is dealt to me. If it would not make any sense, though, to design the hand by shuffling the deck and dealing. There's no way to ensure the results. I guess if I were really clever, I could make it look like I was shuffling the deck when in reality I was stacking it. But that would be a deceitful kind of design called cheating. In the same way, either God designs the details of the biological world, or nature shuffles the deck and natural selection chooses the winning hand. The mechanism is either conscious and intentional design or unconscious and unintentional mutation and natural selection. Creation has a purpose, a goal. Evolution is accidental, like a straight flush dealt to a poker rookie. The idea that something is designed by chance is contradictory. Like trying to put a square peg in a round hole, it just doesn't fit. Now, I will say that this is theistic evolution is different than what's being presented here. This is a nuanced view, and it wasn't given justice in this book on this point, so I encourage people to look into it. But theistic evolution will often say that God had a hand in creating biological life, and that he had a hand in directing the process of evolution, and that the evolution gives the appearance of random mutation. Okay, it gives the appearance of random mutation, but it's not purely random. All right, so moving on. Only science gives reliable truth. This modern slogan seems reasonable at first glance. Many people think knowledge begins and ends with the scientific method, and anything not confirmed by science is mere opinion and unsubstantiated belief. This view is called scientism. However, those who hold this view will be surprised to know that it commits suicide. Consider this dialogue. I don't believe in religion. Why not? There is no scientific evidence for it. Then then you shouldn't believe in science either. Why not? Because there is no scientific evidence for it. I might have moved a little too quickly on that one, so let me expand a bit. I noticed first that the slogan, only science gives reliable truth, is a statement about truth that also purports to be true. So it includes itself in what it refers to, in the same way that the statement all English sentences are false includes itself. Next, I simply applied our basic test for suicide by asking, can the statement satisfy its own requirement? I quickly realized it could not. Since there is no scientific evidence proving that science is the only way to know truth, the view self-destructs. I then use Columbo to point out the flaw. The next time someone dismisses you with only science gives reliable truth, canard, ask if he wants you to take the statement as fact or as an unsubstantiated opinion. In fact, ask what testable scientific evidence led him to his conclusion. As it turns out, this claim is not a fact of science. It is a philosophical assertion about science that itself cannot be proven by any scientific method, and would therefore be unreliable according to this approach. So one other thing to note is that science is filled with unverifiable assumptions, and such as the reality of the external world. That's something that science just has to take for granted in order for it to work, or that the future is going to behave like the past. That's something that science just has to assume, and that's what we all have to assume. Or that there are other minds other than my own. That's something that science has to just assume. Or that our language is adequate for describing how reality is constituted, including our mathematical language. That numbers are capable of actually conveying truth. These kinds of stuff, there is a lot of things that science cannot prove and just has to assume as true in order for it to even work. All right, so religious suicide. The notion of religious pluralism, that all religions are equally true or valid, is also self-refuting. And I'm going to be talking about this at the church this week, religious pluralism, and whether or not Christian particularism, aka Christian exclusivism, is to be preferred. There are two ways to demonstrate this. First, if all religions are true, then Christianity is true. Yet, a central claim of classical Christianity is that other religions are false when taken as a whole. And pay close attention to that, taken as a whole, because many other religions can have aspects of truth in them, but they fail to be as accurate about how reality is constituted. They are not as accurate as Christianity is. That's what the claim is. Clearly, Jesus was not a pluralist. Either Christianity is correct that Jesus is God's Messiah for the world and that other religions are deceptions, as Scripture teaches, or Christianity is false and some other view is true. In no case, though, can all religions be true and valid. Second, when you think about it, religions give diverse pictures of what reality is like. Some forms of Hinduism teach that God is impersonal. Islam, Judaism, and Christianity teach that God is a personal being. In Buddhism, the question of God is irrelevant. In their central teaching about God, then these religions are at odds with each other. In classical theism, death is final, followed by either eternal reward or eternal punishment. In the Eastern religions, death is a door the soul passes through many times as it works out its karma in reincarnation. Some religions teach that reprobates are destroyed while the righteous live on. Can you see the problem? When someone dies, they might go to heaven or hell, or they might be reincarnated, or they might simply turn to dust, but they can't do them all at the same time. Some religions are clearly mistaken on details central to their worldview. Every one of them could be wrong on every single point in principle, but they cannot all be right. Note, this is not bigotry. It's simple math. Taken on face value, then religious pluralism commits suicide. You are what you eat. I once saw a sign in a restaurant that read, "You are what you eat." I pointed out to the waitress that if we are what we eat, then we wouldn't be something until we eat something. But we shouldn't eat something unless we are something. Therefore, it is not true that we are what we eat. The waitress, unschooled in the finer points of self-refuting arguments, looked at me and said, "You'll have to talk to the manager." All right, so I personally kind of view that as being somewhat pedantic, but anyway, yeah. What we learned in this chapter, first, we learned that we do not always have to do all the work when dealing with an argument or a challenge. Sometimes a view defeats itself. The tactic we use to expose this tendency is called suicide. Suicidal views have within them the seeds of their own destruction because they express contradictory concepts. They refute themselves. That's why they are called self-refuting. Views that violate the law of non-contradiction are necessarily false. This means that nothing can be done to fix them. They are beyond repair in this world or any world. If a view entails contradiction, for example, all English sentences are false, there is no hope for reviving it. For this reason, the presence of contradiction is a decisive defeater for any argument or point of view. We also learned how to recognize and respond to self-destructive statements. First, we pay attention to the basic premise, conviction, or claim. Next, ask if the claim applies to itself. If so, does it satisfy its own criteria? Or is there an internal contradiction? If the exact same reasons in favor of another's view or against your own defeat the reasons themselves, then the view is self-refuting. If you discover a problem, use a question, Columbo, rather than a statement to point it out. Finally, we learned how to respond to popular examples of ideas or objections that violate the law of non-contradiction in a straightforward fashion, formal suicide. Remember, many formal contradictions are not immediately obvious. Instead, they are implicit, embedded in a larger idea. This makes them easy to miss. Even intelligent and educated people sometimes hold contradictory views without realizing it. All right, so we got to the end of the chapter. It's time to celebrate. Woo-hoo! We got to the end. And we have talked about contradictory views and how they are contradictory and why they're contradictory, especially with views that are implicitly contradictory. I do want to emphasize that if you kind of go about this in a I would say a pedantic way, then you will get responses like that waitress where you'll just have to talk to the manager. People won't find it as interesting as you do when you get introduced to this kind of stuff. But also remember that, let's go to face only. But remember that remember when you're having conversations regarding, Christianity, God's existence, and that kind of stuff, that these are nuanced topics. These are nuanced topics that are very, how should I say it? They have a lot of precision in them. As when you start reading, Mighty Venus says, a great chapter. That is not a contradictory view. Yep, that's correct. That one's not a contradictory view. But the what I was saying is that when we are talking about the existence of God, we're diving into philosophy, and we're diving into theology. We're diving into things that require precise word formulation. Okay, many times you're gonna find, especially if you're doing this on the internet, you're gonna find non-Christians that have poor conversational awareness, poor contextual awareness, and they do not appreciate the nuance of these matters. If you do a study of Christian dogma, you will quickly come to realize that words have meaning and precision matters. One of the biggest controversies of the church was talking about how does Jesus relate to God? Is he homoousia with God, or is he homoiousia with God? And those words sound very similar to each other. But is he of the same substance as God the Father, or is he of similar substance to God the Father? And we had serious debates for hundreds of years regarding this kind of stuff, and still do today. So keep that in mind, and a lot of these finer points of Christian doctrine, when you get challenged by non-Christians, a lot of times it's best to just leave it alone. They are not in the place to. A lot of these things are spiritually discerned, and they are not. Often they are not in a place to really grasp it, and they don't even want to grasp it. They just want to rattle your cage. Okay, so keep that in mind. But I really appreciate you guys coming out tonight and being a part of this Monday night book study. Just a reminder, this book study happens every Monday night at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Their next chapter is chapter 11, and it's going to be and it's entitled "Practical Suicide." So I'll post things up on the internet, and we'll let you guys know about when it's going to happen. I'll see you guys next week. Thanks again for coming out, and have a great week, everybody. Thank you, and God bless. Hey, before you go, I hope you enjoyed today's enlightening discussion during our Christian Apologetics book study. It's always a blessing to come together to explore our faith and grow in our understanding. Your participation means the world to me, and I'm grateful for your continued support of Northeast Christian Apologetics. Remember, you can stay connected with me and access valuable resources by visiting my website at nechristianapologetics.com. There you'll find a wealth of articles, videos, and recommended reading material to deepen your knowledge of Christian apologetics. If you're as passionate as I am about equipping believers to defend their faith and engage in meaningful conversations, you can also support this ministry in various ways. One way to support this work is through patreon.com. By becoming a patron, you'll have access to exclusive content, early access to our discussions, and a chance to connect with like-minded individuals who share your passion for Christian apologetics. If Patreon is not your style, some people prefer to give me a one-time tip. And if you'd like to do that, then feel free to do so through Venmo or Cash App. But of course, there are many ways to support me. By praying for this ministry, sharing the content on social media, or simply spreading the word about what I do. Every bit of support goes a long way in helping me fulfill my mission. Once again, thank you for joining me today. Your presence and engagement enrich these discussions, and together, we're on a journey to strengthen our faith and share the good news with others. Stay tuned for more exciting book studies, thought-provoking discussions, and opportunities to grow your Christian apologetics journey. I look forward to seeing you again.